Some Sound Off extra action for you here on a Tuesday as Wade Keller of the Pro Wrestling Torch broke the news overnight that Dean Ambrose has given his notice to WWE that he will be finishing up with the company when his contract expires at the end of April. And WWE has taken the step of doing something that they normally do not do in situations like this, which is they have very quickly come out as they have been asked by people all day long for a comment on this, and they have issued a statement confirming the report, saying that Dean Ambrose, real name Jonathan Good, will not be renewing his contract with WWE when it expires in April. We are grateful and appreciative of all that Dean has given to WWE and our fans. We wish him well and hope that one day Dean will return to WWE. The Torch reported that Ambrose broke the news to management over the weekend. He had a meeting as well with Vince McMahon one-on-one after being offered a new, what is said to have been a 5-year deal and a raise several weeks ago. He is expected to finish up not long after Wrestlemania, although I guess if his contract runs until the end of April, I suppose they could keep him working straight through until then. Even if it was only house shows. The report said that Ambrose, he's very long been frustrated with the creative direction of his character and just reached a breaking point recently. I'm going to guess if I had to take a stab at it, it was maybe the whole getting rabies shots on TV in that corny segment they did a while back. That might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. But he has made it very clear. And WWE obviously took it to heart because they have not wasted time in putting a statement out about this. But he made it very clear, apparently, to management. He is not interested in negotiating any further. There is no point in any further discussions. He is not interested. This is not about money. He is someone who has saved his money. He lives a modest lifestyle. And one person in the company told the Torch that Ambrose, quote, hates hokey shit. And because so much of his character has been portrayed as hokey over the last few years, this person was not surprised that this has happened, that it's built up to this point. Now, at the Royal Rumble on Sunday, Ambrose was in there for about 12 minutes. It wasn't like he was quickly in and out. He was in there about 12 minutes. He got dumped out by Aleister Black. This after dropping the Intercontinental title on Raw a few weeks ago in that triple threat match to Bobby Lashley. Last night on Monday Night Raw, Ambrose came out. He interrupted the opening segment. Seth Rollins, Triple H were in the ring. They were talking. Ambrose came out. He said he was sick and tired of this father-son thing between the two of them, and he called Rollins a suck-up. Told Triple H to put him in a match with Seth Rollins right here and now. And when Triple H went to go leave, Ambrose got in his face and said, hey, do you need permission from your father-in-law? And funny enough, the crowd chanted, yes, he does. And Triple H called for a referee, and we had Seth Rollins against Dean Ambrose. Rollins beat Ambrose with the stomp, fair and square, clean, right in the middle of the ring. I thought Ambrose, of all the things on Raw last night, obviously Becky and Ronda being, the most interesting thing that happened on the show, the little interaction that Ambrose had with Triple H was actually one of the better parts of Raw last night. On a show that overall really wasn't all that good. People tend to let their judgment be clouded by one or two good segments. But I thought what Ambrose did was one of the more interesting little interactions of the night. So he goes out there, he loses, they come back from break, he's sitting in the ring, and he's got a microphone, and it looks like he's about to bare his soul. He starts talking about, I've got something very serious to say, and don't be jerks. People are chanting at him. And we heard Nia Jax and Tamina's music hit. They came to the ring. Nia got up in Ambrose's face. This after Nia entered the Men's Royal Rumble the night before and got beaten around by Dolph Ziggler and Rey Mysterio, got RKO'd by Randy Orton. Now she's trying to pick a fight with Dean Ambrose. And Dean turned his attention to Tamina. Nia hit him from behind. He went out of the ring. The referees had to hold him back. He did a promo after the show for the website saying, I'm going to assume that Nia accidentally fell into me. I know she wouldn't start something with me. I'm a man. Come on. And it sure seemed like they could potentially be setting something up there, but we'll talk about WrestleMania in a second. I was talking to some people on Twitter last night. You guys were tweeting me during the show. We were going back and forth. And when I read this story this morning, I laughed because somebody had tweeted me about Ambrose looking like he, was going through the motions in his match. And I made the comment, I said, Ambrose has looked like he's been going through the motions for a lot longer than just last night. And now we hear the news that he's given his notice and he's on his way out of the company. Now, he had a big comeback last year from injury. He was out for a very long time. I think it was a tricep or a bicep injury. He was out for a number of months, came back, and I, like a lot of other people, thought, well, I think it would be better for him to turn and to be a heel and show a side of him and his personality that we really have not yet had a chance to see in WWE. He came back as a babyface, wasn't really doing a whole lot. He was sort of in Rollins' corner for a while. And the night that Roman Reigns announced that his leukemia had returned is the night that Rollins and Ambrose won the Raw Tag Team titles from Ziggler and McIntyre, and the same night that Ambrose laid out Seth Rollins and beat him up and turned heel, got great heel heat for what he had done. I know a lot of people thought it was insensitive and it was classless for them to do that on the night that Roman made his big announcement. I thought it was great. I didn't see what was so bad about it, and I thought, this is how you get this guy off to the races. And there's a lot of different ways they could have gone with that and why he did what he did. And I thought the heel turn was long overdue, and I had high hopes that we would get to see a dark side of the Dean Ambrose character that we hadn't seen before. And it never came. It was just more goofy segments where he got inoculated one night from all the disgusting fans. They're going to give me a disease and I don't want to be out amongst you people. Just cheap, basic heel heat. He had a disappointing feud with Seth Rollins. It just felt like whatever excitement was there the night that he turned completely vanished. They call him the Lunatic Fringe. For the longest time, that was their nickname, because everybody needs a nickname. They still call Seth Rollins the Architect, like he builds buildings. It made sense when he was part of the Shield. Why they still call him the Architect, I have no idea. But Dean Ambrose was always the Lunatic Fringe. The Lunatic Fringe turned into the Lunatic Cringe. What did he ever do to live up to this lunatic moniker? What made him such a lunatic? What did he do? What did he do? What was he ever really allowed to say or do that would make him a lunatic? Nothing. Nothing. But as far as who's responsible, why did Ambrose not, get over the way that he should have when he came back? Look, the blame cuts both ways here. You're going to have people who blame Ambrose and say the guy's boring. He's going through the motions. He didn't put the effort in. He didn't look motivated. And you're going to also have people who blame WWE. They put all the blame on them. Creative had nothing for him. Creative sucks. The company didn't give him the chance to succeed. The blame cuts both ways. It isn't all Dean's fault. It's not all WWE's fault, but they both share in the blame. It lies somewhere in the middle. But there is no doubt Creative did not do this guy any favors. They did absolutely nothing to help this guy. They all but sabotaged whatever chance he may have had to really set himself apart from all the other heels on the roster. What was the biggest thing he did? He got a leather jacket to change his look up a little bit. That was it. They put sirens in his theme song. That was their big idea. Now, Ambrose lives in Las Vegas. All Elite Wrestling is running its first show in Vegas the very same month that he becomes a free agent and his WWE deal expires. It's only natural to think that he could show up at that Double or Nothing show. And say whatever you want about his recent run in WWE and how he didn't live up to expectations or he had disappointing matches. Never underestimate how much a fresh coat of paint and new surroundings and new people to work with can mean for somebody. It's not unlike a baseball player who flops for one team, gets traded away to another team, another city, another ballpark. All of a sudden, they start playing like Willie Mays. If he's unhappy, if he's unmotivated, whether it's All Elite or some other place, Dean Ambrose may have been going through the motions, but that doesn't mean Jon Moxley will, assuming he goes back to his old ring name. This is assuming he even wants to jump right back into wrestling. For all we know, the guy may pull a CM Punk and just take a break and not do any wrestling at all. Maybe he's burned out and he needs a break. You got to remember something. Dean Ambrose was WWE's Iron Man for, I'd say, at least a couple of years there, a few years ago. When guys would go down with an injury, he talked about this in the Austin podcast, he was the guy they called upon. Hey, someone can't wrestle, someone's hurt, can you fill in for him? And he would step up and he would fly wherever and he would work the show. He wrestled more matches than any other WWE star in 2016. I knew it was around 200. I looked up the number. 204 matches total that year, more than anybody else on the roster. From January of 2015 through the middle of last year, even after he was out the first half of 2018 with an injury, he still led all of the talent of the company for most matches worked. Almost 600 matches. The dude was a workhorse for that company. It's no wonder he got hurt. And then he needed surgery. He was off for a while. But if you look back, to the beginning of his main roster run, he came up as part of the Shield right out of the gate. Roman, Seth, Dean, all three vaulted right into the main event picture. He didn't come in with vignettes. He didn't come in have to work his way from the bottom. He was thrust into the main event scene. His very first match was that TLC pay-per-view in 2012. It was the Shield against Ryback, Daniel Bryan, and Kane in Brooklyn. And they had a hell of a match. And that was the pattern for much of the following year and the year after that. These guys were cranking out great match after great match. And the Shield was a great act. One of my favorite acts in the company in the last 10 to 15 years. I was a big fan of the Shield. But the year that you have to isolate, not only because he was a workhorse that year, but for what they had him doing, was 2016. 2016 was easily the peak year for Dean Ambrose. He had that great Intercontinental title match. I just featured it in my top 10 Royal Rumble countdown of the greatest championship matches. It was at number 10. At the Royal Rumble, the beginning of that year against Kevin Owens. And actually that same night, the Royal Rumble match came down to Triple H and Dean Ambrose. Crowd was electric for it. They badly wanted Ambrose to win that championship. He ended up wrestling Triple H for the WWE title 2 months later at that Roadblock event. Where, honestly, if you go back in time, you could have easily made the case for the WrestleMania main event that year in Houston. Instead of it being Triple H and Roman Reigns, you could have easily made the case for it, as hot as he was at the time, for it to be Dean Ambrose and Triple H. Instead, he wrestled Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania that year. They had a match that turned out to be a huge disappointment, I thought. Although when he went on Steve Austin's podcast, he all but blamed Brock Lesnar for not even listening to any of the ideas. He had all these wild, crazy ideas, I can only imagine, for what he wanted to do in that match, and he got completely shut down. Of course, I think it was a few months later, Lesnar ended up back in UFC, so I wonder how much of that was him knowing this and not wanting to do anything too crazy and run the risk of getting hurt, although I doubt Ambrose would have known that, but still, you could tell listening to him talk about that how frustrating it was for him. So WrestleMania that year, I thought for him was a huge disappointment, but he was white hot that year. You fast forward a few months, he won the Money in the Bank ladder match. Later that same night, he cashed in. He pinned Seth Rollins. He became the new WWE champion for the very first time. And then, that summer, came his appearance on the Stone Cold podcast. And I've talked about this before, what a disaster that turned into. He is not the kind of person who is completely open about his past. He's not the greatest public speaker. And Austin was really trying to get him to open up about his upbringing, his childhood, and certain memories and things from his past. And clearly he just didn't want to go there. That made the interview awkward. Then came the latter half of the interview. Now, you got to remember, Ambrose was the champion at the time. Austin knows what that's like. He's been WWE champion before. Although Ambrose was never truly positioned as the top guy in the company the way that Austin was. I hesitate to say that he had more of a Jericho run with the belt, but still, he was the WWE champion. He was certainly one of the top guys at the time. And I always thought it was wrong for Austin to do this. Austin's a veteran. He can do whatever he wants. He's one of the greatest of all time. But I think the analogy I used in the past was if you sort of put yourself in that position. If Austin was on the other end of that questioning that Ambrose was under that night, and it was someone like Bruno Sammartino or somebody asking him these questions or calling Austin out for being lazy or being complacent or any of the things that Austin said to Ambrose, I think, what was the exact, resting on his laurels. Resting on his laurels. And I'll never forget the look on Dean Ambrose's face when Austin made that comment. You could tell he was so offended. He just couldn't believe what he heard. And he kind of smirked. But you could tell how much it bothered him. Whether it was true or not is not the point. The point is that your champion just got called out by the veteran, by the old guy, right? In front of the world on live television. This is not like, hey, Dean, come over here. Let me pull you aside and talk to you for a second. Or let me DM you. Not that Ambrose even uses social media. But Austin, if he had something to say to Ambrose that he felt he was doing wrong, absolutely is within his rights to communicate that to Ambrose. I just remember thinking, and I still do, that it was kind of a shitty thing for him to do to call him out like that in front of the world. Because had the same thing happened to Austin, if the roles were reversed, I don't think Austin would have been very happy about that. The point of all this is when that interview was over, I remember the consensus being, and it was certainly for me, Ambrose came out looking a lot worse than he did when he went into that interview. And I don't think he was ever really the same after that. I'm not going to blame it all on the one interview, but he just, after that, was never the same. There was just something off about him. And ever since then, I really can't think of anything of any great note that the man has done. Anything that's really interested me, anything overly important. There were a couple of attempts at a Shield reunion that were constantly being foiled by injury or illness. And for the people shitting on him, and I've already seen some of it online, that, this guy, who cares, not a big loss for WWE. When was the last great match that he had? Look, I agree. I think a lot of his best work came as part of the Shield and all those great six-man tags against Daniel Bryan and the Wyatt family and Evolution, and the matches then that he had with Seth Rollins when Rollins first turned in 2014, the match with Owens at the Royal Rumble in 2016. After that, it gets a bit fuzzy. I'm sure I could pick a match here and there that was pretty good. He had like a program, for example, with AJ Styles, although I'll be honest with you, offhand, I don't remember any of those matches blowing me away either. So it gets a little hazy after 2016. But WrestleMania is right around the corner. We now know, as confirmed by WWE, that he's going to be around until at least the beginning, if not the end of April. So he'll be around for WrestleMania. I can't see them leaving him off the card completely or trying to punish him in some way. I will say that statement that they put out, that's about as diplomatic as a parting statement you will ever see from WWE. Now, they didn't wish him well in his future endeavors, but still, the way that they phrase that and saying, we sure hope that Dean will come back, and be back in WWE at some point, they're definitely treating this differently than they would, I think, treat a similar departure under similar circumstances. So I don't necessarily see them doing anything to completely bury him or anything, but I mentioned the Nia Jax thing earlier. It could have been a one-night thing. I'm not saying that the plan is for him to wrestle Nia Jax at WrestleMania. It sure seems to me like they're testing the waters between what they did Sunday and then Monday as far as a possible intergender match, which they have been dead set against doing for a very long time now. Of all the women on the roster, if they were going to do it with somebody, I would think it would be either Ronda Rousey or somebody like Nia Jax, who they've built up to be this big, monster. Could I see a match at WrestleMania between Nia Jax and Dean Ambrose? Yeah, I could see them doing that. And in fact, now that we know Ambrose is on his way out, they've certainly taken some of the what's the word I'm looking for? They've taken some of the drama out of this whole thing by confirming that he's leaving. Yeah, you know what? I could see him doing the honors for Nia Jax on the way out, which I know would make a lot of people vomit. But if that's what they are sort of testing the waters for here, some kind of an intergender match, that's about as good as one as I could think of. And look, I'm not even saying that it can't turn out to be an interesting build. Now, if you have Dean Ambrose almost channeling the inner spirit of Andy Kaufman from way back when, there is a way to make the build to that match interesting. I don't know how the match would be. I can't speak to that. The match could be the total shits. But there actually is a way, I think, to make this build-up for such a match interesting and entertaining. And if you have a Dean Ambrose who knows that he's leaving and they give him the power and the freedom to sort of build this up in a way that he wants and have a little more input into things, who knows? Maybe it turns out to be one of the more anticipated matches at WrestleMania. He had an interaction last night with Triple H. Now, we certainly heard a lot about the possibility of Triple H wrestling Batista at WrestleMania. When Triple H got hurt, a lot of that talk went away. He confirmed recently that he's been rehabbing his injury and things are going well. It's entirely possible he'll be medically cleared if he wanted to wrestle by the time WrestleMania rolls around. I've heard nothing new about a possible match with Batista. I've not read anything. I've not seen anything new reported about that. You would think that if Batista was going to be coming in for a match in a program with Triple H, he would have showed his face by now. It hasn't happened. Maybe they do Ambrose and Triple H. Maybe they just stick Ambrose in a multi-man ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship. I think the most likely option probably is something along those lines. He becomes one of 6 or 8 men in a random match, and that's the end of Dean Ambrose. Of those 3 scenarios, I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure of the Ambrose Triple H match or Ambrose Nia Jax. I could go either way. I am kind of morbidly intrigued at the idea of a Nia Jax Dean Ambrose match. I can't think of another one that would be any more exciting to me. That's probably about as good of an idea as you're going to get for the guy. So I certainly am open to the idea. But Ambrose is in a great position. He is in a tremendous position right now because he has a name. Now maybe his name has fallen a little bit in the last year or two, but he's got a name, and WWE puts a premium on you if you have a name. Especially if they ever want to have another Shield reunion. You can't have a Shield reunion without Dean Ambrose. You can't have a Shield reunion with 2/3 of the Shield. There's always going to be a spot for him in WWE, and he knows that. Their own statement shows you. They would welcome him back with open arms. So if he wants to go back, he can always go back. And in the meantime, he's in a prime position for a great payday wherever he lands. Now, WWE supposedly was ready to offer him, or did offer him, 7 figures per year. He may not get that much money somewhere else, but I don't think he's going to be hurting for money wherever he lands. And it sounds like money isn't even all that important to him. So who is in the best position to give him what he wants? What is it? Is it creative freedom? Is that what he wants? Is it a lighter schedule? Is he just beat up and tired and doesn't want to work as many weeks? We don't know. We haven't heard from him. We don't know. Don't even bother asking Renee Young, because she'll just tell you that I just live with him. I don't know. If I had to take a guess, I would say more creative freedom would probably be pretty appealing for him. But the competition is getting hot right now in wrestling when it comes to talent. Everybody's looking to lock down people to long-term contracts. Ring of Honor is competing very hard right now for talent. All Elite, yeah, they haven't run a show yet, true. But they've got their sights set, I'm sure, on some named talent. You can't discount MLW. They've got to be in the running. Impact? Yeah, we just heard that Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega came this close to signing with Impact because of their relationship and their friendship with Don Callis. Those would have been 2 incredible pickups. So you can't count Impact out of the conversation either. There's never been a better time for somebody like Dean Ambrose to step away and survey the landscape. Look at Neville. Neville went dark for a while. I think there was a non-compete. He couldn't really go anywhere for a while. When his contract finally lapsed, he resurfaced in Dragon Gate. Dragon Gate is where he got his start. He has a certain loyalty to Dragon Gate. He's clearly happy having gone back to Dragon Gate. Now, finally, he's starting to make the rounds a little more frequently. It's been 5 years since CM Punk left wrestling. 5 years. He hasn't set foot once inside of a wrestling ring. He opted to go try his hand at MMA. Who's to say Dean Ambrose doesn't want to take it easy for a while? But the AEW rumors are not going to go away. And I don't see why they would. The timing could not be more perfect. You want to make a big splash with your first big pay-per-view? There's one way to do it. The guy goes right from WWE television to this brand new promotion. Can't hurt in any negotiations they're having when it comes to a new TV deal. I mean, he's no Ronda Rousey. They're not going to get $1 billion like they did from Fox, in part because they have a Ronda Rousey on their roster, but it can't hurt. And they know this. As far as the situation is, his wife still works for WWE. Obviously, I don't think this affects her at all. WWE loves Renee Young. This is not going to blow back on her in any way. You got to wonder, though, how that might affect things, too, because, I'm sure they travel together and they get to see each other a lot, given that they're on the road working for the same company, and now they won't be. They may not get to see each other as often. So you never know how, the kind of impact that could have on things. But if he's made his mind up and he's leaving, then that's one of the consequences of leaving. Nothing that you could do about that. But just because Dean Ambrose hasn't been the belle of the ball for a while doesn't mean that his free agency isn't going to be one of the biggest wrestling stories of 2019. He could end up having a career resurgence. And we've seen it with guys before. Drew McIntyre. The guy was a joke. The guy came in as the chosen one. A few years later, he's jobbing to Hornswoggle, taking bumps in a WLC match. He went away for a while, completely reinvented himself, and now look at him. You never know what could happen. This, I think, is exactly what he needs. He was on the road to nowhere in WWE. Nowhere. He needs to step away for a while or go somewhere else. He needs to rediscover what made him such a big name on the independent scene all those years ago. Because there was a lot of buzz around him before he came to WWE. Does he have it in him? Can he do it? Can he reinvent himself? Does he even want to? I said earlier, he's looked recently like he's just been going through the motions. That could have been because he was unhappy. What does a happy Dean Ambrose look like? What does a motivated Dean Ambrose look like? If he's a gambling man, we may find out in Vegas in a few months.